Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Hello, Ryan. Hello, Lorna. Hello, Austin. Hello, Brenna. And Hartley, to answer your question, all we did yesterday was get Pico 8 installed. And so if you can get to this screen, then you're all good and ready to go for today. So the first thing I want to say is that, okay, great. I'm glad you can all hear me. So the first thing I want to say is that we did spend yesterday making sure everybody could get up and running. So if you're not up and running today, we unfortunately don't have time to help you out with that, but you should still watch and you should still see what we do. And then after this class, I'll be happy to help you. But we do need to kind of get started today so that we can get through everything we want to get through. That said, this will also be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Now, the other thing I want to say is that I know that some of you have done this class before, and if you've done it before, you know the first day we usually cover some coding concepts. Well, even if you've done that before, I still want you to pay attention to what we're doing today, because we are going to learn some new coding concepts that we haven't learned before. So I want to make sure that everybody is still following along. Even if you already learned some of the coding concepts before in the other class, we're going to cover some new coding concepts. So just make sure we follow along. Lorna, should it look like a blue screen with a red border and a pink lower border? I'm not sure quite what you mean. It should look like what you see. Oh, you mean like when you're actually started, like when you're like this, like, yeah, well, we're going to get into that. So basically when you first start Pico 8, this is what you see. You see this screen over here. I'm going to draw a square around it just so you know that, like, you don't, I don't care if you see all this stuff. That's just all me doing my live stream stuff. Pico 8 itself is just this part here, this part of the screen. Wow, that looks terrible. So it's just this. That's all the Pico 8 is. So if you're seeing that part when you start up, you're all good, and we'll get ready. So when you start it up, what I want you to do is I'm going to show you how to save what you're about to work on. So when you start it up, it starts up completely blank, and you could just type save and then game and then hit enter. And then it just saves, you know, it doesn't, game is just the name I gave it. I could, you know, if my game was called neat, you know, fun game, fine. Then it saves it as neat fun game. But when you first start it up, it goes like this. It goes, and then it starts up, and this is how we start at Pico 8. Now, I want to show you all the parts of Pico 8 really quickly, just to walk through so you're not confused about what you see and how to get around. So to get out of this, you hit the escape key up in the top corner of your keyboard. Hit escape, and you'll end up here. Okay. If you hit escape again, it goes back. And if you hit escape again, it goes back in. This is where we write all of the code. Okay. And you can tell it's up here across the top. It has these little icons. The ones with parentheses is where we put code. Okay. And you can make tabs of code and stuff like that. So this is where we'll be writing the code that we learned today and that write for our game tomorrow. So this next one, this is called the Sprite Editor, and a sprite is just a piece of art used for your game. So if you know, some of you have seen me draw my little smiley face player like this, and so this is where we draw the art for the game. And each piece of art is 8 pixels or 8 dots. That's what the dots are called. They're called pixels. Is 8 pixels wide and 8 pixels tall. And each one has a number. And we'll learn how to use this more as we go through. But you should just know that, like, here's all the different, you know, pieces of art that we can use for our game. And we have these colors that we can choose from, which, even though it seems like it's not a lot of colors, it is actually enough. Milo, we're not going to make the game today. Today, we're going to be covering coding concepts. But like I said, even if you learned about the coding concepts from the previous class, you should still pay attention today because we're going to learn new coding concepts. And Lorna, as soon as I finish showing everybody these different parts of Pico 8, then we're going to get started coding. So this is where we make the art for the game. And then each of these pieces of sprites you can use to build a map if you have a map that's part of your game. And the game that we're building will use this map. Then there's this part, which is where you draw sounds. And you literally just draw the sounds. And if you hit space, you can hear what it sounds like. And there's different types of instruments that you can use. Like we could draw with this one or this one. And you can slow them down or speed them up. Can everybody hear my sound? I just want to make sure everybody can hear my sound. And you could, I'm gonna do this, or you can change the volume down here. You can just, set the volume to 0. And so like, for example, I'm gonna make like a coin sound, which some of you have heard. And you just start it high and then it goes do, 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 like this. And then when we play it, it will be like that. Okay, good. If you're not hearing my sound, then make sure that you have your own sound turned on. I mean, obviously, you can hear my voice, but you should be able to hear some kind of sound from me. Okay, so now, okay, good. So then this one is used for making music, but we're not going to really use that. It takes a little bit longer to explain. So this is for making sound. This is for making maps. And this is for making the art, also called sprites in our game. And this is for writing code. So now we're going to, I'm going to show you. So if you did that thing where you type save game, and mine's going to say, whoa, you already have one. And I'm going to say, yes, go ahead and overwrite. Once you've done that and you're now I'm back in the code editor, if you hit Control S, it pops up a little thing. It's like saving, Control S. Now, if you're on a Mac, don't hit Control S, you hit Command S. So Command S or Control S, if depending on whether you're on Mac or Windows, will save it like that. Okay. So now I want to get into coding. And don't worry if you don't have this saved, because we're not going to really keep this. This is just for you to learn with. Okay. There's a couple main concepts I want you to know in coding. And one is how to store information, and then how to tell it to do information in little batches. Okay, so first we're going to know how to store information, and that's using something called a variable. And a variable is called a variable because what's inside it can vary. So we give it a name, like let's say size, and we give it a number, like maybe like 50. So now the name size is holding the number 50. And if I say, big size equals, I could say size plus 10. So what it's going to do is it's going to go look and see, well, what number is being stored in size? Oh, it's 50. Good. Then we're going to replace this with 50, add it to 10, and then we'll have 60, and then 60 will get put inside of big size. If you, sorry, real quick. So there was one question, how do you delete the sound thing? Don't worry about deleting it right now. When you do want to delete it, you can just drag the volume all the way across the bottom and it makes the volume nothing. But we're going to go back to the code here. Okay. So when you make a variable and you give it a name, you can store something in it. So in this case, we're storing numbers. Okay. But I want you to know something about variables is this equal sign is really important, because in math up to now, you've learned that the equal sign means these two are the same. So whether you wrote size equals 50 or 50 equals size, in math, those would be the same thing. But in coding, they're not the same thing. The equal sign in coding is actually like an action. So it says, put what's on this side, what's on the right side, put it in what's on the left side. So equals doesn't mean these are the same. It means take this and put it inside this. So when we have an equal sign here, we're saying take what's in size, add 10 to it, then take that final result and put it in big size. Okay, so it's an action. It's saying put this in here, and that's really important to understand that, because that can trip up people when they first learn coding. So there's other things that we can store in variables. You can also store text, but in order to store text, you have to put it in quotes. So we have to say, like, if we put name equals, we have to put quote Dylan and then an end quote. And this tells it this is text, because sometimes we might write numbers. We might write like Dylan has 1 dog. So this, it's not storing a number, it's storing the letter. It's just storing or not the letter, but like the numeral, the symbol for 1. It's not actually storing like here, it's not storing the symbol 1. It's actually storing like the number 10. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure, because no, you don't have to write all this if you don't want to, but you can if you want to. But this is just so you understand that these variables, you can store information in them, and each variable has, a type of information that it stores. There's another type of information that computers love to use, which is true and false. So we can say, like, if we had a game and we want to know, is the player alive? We could make a variable called alive, and it can say true. And when we write true, no quotes or anything, just writing true, this variable can hold that, and it can hold true or it can hold false. Like if we have, has key equals false. So now this is storing the value false, and we can compare that to things and see, like, all right, if alive is true, then let's do this thing. But if alive is not true, then let's do that thing. And it lets us make decisions about how the program should work. Lorna, don't worry. If you want to type this in, you can, but you don't have to. Right now, you can just follow along, because we're just learning what variables are and how they work. So I want you to see that these are 3 types of variables. We can store numbers, we can store text, and we can store true and false. Okay. There's another kind of variable that we're going to be using in the games that we make tomorrow and the day after. And again, if you've done this class before, this is a new type of variable that we didn't learn last time. And this kind of variable is actually when you need to store more than one thing in one variable. Sean, yes, that is correct. This is how you ask questions if you have questions. So sometimes we want to store, like, let's say we want to store 3 different names, okay? We could say names equals, and then instead of storing just like in quotes the name that we want, we put a curly brace. Now I want you to know where the curly brace is. It's up next to the P key, okay? So you have like U, I, O, P, and then if you hold down Shift and hit that key, it makes a curly brace. And then right after it is the one that finishes it, okay? It's important to know where those are. So these are called curly braces. And if you have curly braces around things, like if we say Joe, comma, Mary, comma, Jim. So now we have these 3 names are being stored inside this one variable. And you can think of these curly braces almost like a hug, like to like hold them all together and keep them all kept together in this one variable. Because here we are storing just one thing. I'll get rid of this so that makes sense. So name equals Dylan, but names can store 3 names. Now, each of these get a number. So this is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one. So for instance, let's say I want to print some stuff. So I can say print parenthesis, and then if I print size, it will print the number 50. if I print name, it will print Dylan. Okay. If I print alive, it will print true. But let's say I want to print Mary. Well, if I just print names, it will print all of the names, and I don't want all of the names. I just want one of these. So you can use a special way of getting to each one. So remember, this is the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one. So if I put names and then a square bracket, where square bracket is a curly brace without hitting shift. If I hit a square bracket and then 2, and then an end square bracket, that says, I want names, but I want the second one, okay? So what I want you to do is, if you've written this in, you can now hit Control R, or Command R if you're on a Mac. If you haven't written all this in, that's okay, I'm gonna run it. So if you hit Control R, it actually does what we just did. And you can see it printed 50 and Dylan and True and Mary, okay? So I want you to see how these variables work. We have a variable that holds a number, a variable that holds text, and we have a variable that holds true and false, and we have a variable that holds lots of things. And we don't even have to have these be, this doesn't need to be text. We could make one called, I don't know, what do we want to call it? Sizes. And now we can store numbers in there too. We can store like 34, 89, and 54. And we can store lots of them. We can do 32 and 90 and 1, and then put an end curly brace. And now, if you got to the black screen, then you can just hit escape when you're done and it goes back to this screen. So sizes stores a lot of different numbers. So if I wanted to print the 5th sizes number, I would say print sizes 5. Now, if it said, so Milo had a question, how do you get to the black screen? You hit Control R or Command R, and that runs your code. That says, okay, go do this. Henry, I'm not gonna go over sound right now because that's not what we're working on. So if you hit Control R or Command R, if you're on a Mac, it will run your code. So here it ran my code and it printed out 50, Dylan, True, Mary, and then 90. So if I hit escape, it goes back into my code. You don't have to type all this in. I just want you to at least watch it. It's good if you type it in. It's good practice, but you don't have to. So you can see we made these two variables that store lots of information at once. We stored 3 names, we stored 6 different numbers, okay? And then we're using print to print them out. We print size, we print name, we print alive, and we print the second name and the 5th size, okay? Lorna, when you hit, are you on a Mac or are you on Windows? Sorry, I'm gonna answer a few questions here before we go on to the next thing. Marcella, you don't need to type this in. I think I answered that question, but you don't need to type it in. You just, but I do want you to at least watch it. Oh, it did work. Okay, good. Sorry, I missed that. Okay, good. So at this point, you should all understand how variables work. You can store information in them, and there's different types of information that you can store, okay? So you can mix it up in names. You could store a number and names if you want to, like, it doesn't have to be all the exact same kind of information. Now, there is one thing that I do want to show you, because there's neat things you can do with names, right? So I'm going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to just get rid of all of that. And I'm also going to type in a special command called CLS and then put parenthesis, parenthesis. You have to put the parentheses there. You have to type CLS, parenthesis, parenthesis, and that will make sure it clears the screen. So then when we run this, it will make sure everything on the screen goes blank before it does what we want. That way you can just clear out all the stuff so we can get a blank screen. So let's say I want to know how many names there are. Well, I could look in my code. I could just look at it and see, oh, there's 3 names. Okay, fine. But let's say I want to know just how many there are. Well, there's a special way I can do that. If I type $, like hashtag names, this is the $, it's Shift 3 on your keyboard. Then it tells me, tell me how many things are being stored in names. So if I run this, if I hit Control R, I get a 3. That's because I have 3 names. If I change this to $sizes and I run it, now I get a 6 because I have 6 sizes being stored. And that's really useful because I need to know how many things are in there. Now, what if I want to add something to sizes? So I can type this. I can type add to sizes. And what do I want to add? Maybe the number, 8. Okay. Now I'm going to print sizes again, sizes. So if this printed 7 or 6, this had 6, right? Maybe I'm going to put the number 12 in there. Okay. So if this had 6 numbers and I print sizes, it will say 6. But then if I add 12 to that, now I'm adding a 7th size. So when I print this again, this time it will say 7. So I'm going to run it, Control R, and you can see the first time it printed 6, then we added something, and now it prints 7. Okay, so we can add things to our list. So I hope this all makes sense so far. We have different variables, and then we have special variables that can store lots of things. Now I do want to show you something else, which is, see how I've been writing these things where I have a name and then I have parentheses? These are like instructions to the computer to go do something, not just store something like these. These are instructions to go do something. So in this case, it clears the screen. And in this case, it prints something to the screen. But we want to be able to make our own functions, okay? So I'm going to erase everything that's on the screen here. So don't worry. That's why I said don't worry if you haven't been typing it in. Or if you have typed it in, don't worry about us getting rid of it. Now, I want to show you 3 special things. So we can write a function by typing function and then the name. And then there's 3 special functions. Functions are these things that you can tell the computer to go do. And a lot of times they're like a set of instructions all at once. So we're going to make one function called function underscore init, and then put parenthesis, parenthesis, and then type end. What this does is this tells Pico 8, I want a function, which is I want to be able to have this set of instructions that I can run whenever I want. And I'm going to name it this. And these ones with an underscore have an important use, and I'll get to that in a sec. And then the parentheses are how you can give this function information. Like for instance, if I made a function that tells my player to jump, right? Sometimes I might need to tell it how high to jump. So I would put the number of, how high I want them to jump in here. So this function, when Pico 8 sees the init function, it will run this, whatever is in here, one time at the beginning of our game, okay? Then there's another function, and we're going to call it underscore update. And this is another special function that Pico 8 will see and run by itself, okay? So init runs one time at the beginning of the game, but update will happen 30 times a second. 30 times a second. Anything that's inside here, in between the function and end, anything in here will get run 30 times a second, like blah, 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 like super fast, okay? And then function draw is the last one. And then this one also gets run 30 times a second, but it happens after update. So when you hit Control R, whatever's in here will run one time. Then whatever's in here will run, and then whatever's in here will run, and then it will go back and run this again, and then run this again, and then run this again, and then run this again. And it will do these 2 things 30 times a second. So it'll go init, update, draw, update, draw, update, draw. So I want to show you how this works. So let's say we make a variable called size, and we put the number 0 in it, okay? Now, in update, remember update runs 30 times a second. So now in update, I'm gonna say size plus equals 1. And then what that does is that's a special command that tells it add 1 to size, okay? And then in draw, I'm going to clear the screen. So every 30th of a second, it's gonna clear out everything on the screen. And then I'm gonna tell it to print size, okay? So it's gonna clear the screen, and then it's gonna print size. So what's gonna happen is size is gonna start at 0, then 30 times a second, it's gonna do these two things. It's going to add 1 to the size, then it's gonna clear the screen and print the size. Now let's run it. So if I hit Control R, there it goes. 30 times a second, it's clearing the screen and printing the number. And every 30th of a second, it's adding 1. So every time it counts to 30, that's 1 second that went by. And then if we hit escape, it ends our program. And then we get escape again, and it goes back into our code. Okay. To answer Milo, your question, I did get it, and I wrote you back yesterday. And so hopefully your dad has that email. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. We have a size, we add 1 to it every time this update happens, and then we clear the screen and print the size. Now, what would happen if we didn't clear the screen? Let's see. I'm gonna take that out and we're gonna run it again. Whoa, now it's not clearing the screen, it's just adding it to the screen. So this is why we wanna clear the screen first. So if I escape and escape again. Okay, so now when we make our game, it's important that we know how these work, that these, oh, 1 second, hold on 1 sec. Oh, you know what? Sorry, my thing had a bug and I didn't see some of the questions. So Sean, you had a question. It says, when I go to the black screen, it says syntax error line 1 and it says size plus 50. Make sure that you say size equals instead of size plus. Or if you, if it says something, if you just go to line 1, you can see what line you're at down here in the corner, and then you can see if there's a mistake there. Sorry, I want to make sure somehow it's putting the questions out of order, so I'm not seeing some of your questions, and I just want to make sure I'm getting them all working. Asmi, when you said, when I save the code, it does not work. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Lorna, what's happening with yours? You said it's broken, and what's happening? Make sure, I'm gonna leave this on the screen, so make sure you have exactly what's on here. Does it give you an error when you try to run it? Or does it just not do what you expect it to do? Lorna, what is yours doing that you don't want it to do? Yeah, if you type stuff on this screen, you may get a syntax error. So you hit escape and it should go back into here. And this is where you would type the code. Asmi, what happened? What does it say when you do what you want it to do? Does it say it? I'm not sure. I say if we have the recordings from the old ones, but I do have the videos that I created as homework from the previous ones. And if you send me an email, I can send those to you. Lorna, if you have this on the screen and you hit Control R or Command R if you're on a Mac, does it count up like this? How do you get to which screen, Dean? The blue screen that we're at? Oh, okay. So Dean, I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today, we're not going to help people get up and running today. That's what we used yesterday for. So if you send me an email, I will help you get started. But I just want to make sure that we're just focusing on this today. But yeah, just send me an email and I will be happy to help you get that work. Okay, good. Is everybody? Yes, Kanan, you can do that. I will show you how. Lorna, when you try to run it, does it tell you a problem? Like, for instance, if I accidentally leave off a parenthesis and I run it, see how I get an error and it tells me? Is it do that, or does it just do something you don't expect? Okay. Are you at the blue coding screen, or are you at this black, or are you at the black screen where, like this? If it's counting up, Sean, then just hit escape and that stops your program, and hit escape again and that goes back into your code. So if you're at the blue coding screen, Lorna, if you hold down the control key, which is in the bottom left corner of your keyboard, hold it down and tap the R key, then it should start running your program. So Kanan had a question, how do we make it count up only after 30 numbers have passed? And I'm going to show you how to do that, because that's actually a really good question and a really good thing to know. So we're going to make a second variable called seconds. And we're going to start that at 0. And we only want seconds to go up if size gets up to 30. Yes. I say just send me an email and I'll send you the homework videos from the previous class. So we only want seconds to go up if size gets to 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 to size. And then what we're going to do right after that, we're going to say if, and then we put in parentheses, because this is going to hold, like, what do we want to check if? And we say if size equals 30. Now, the reason we say equals instead of equals is because if you remember, one equals sign says take this and put it in here. And we don't want to do that. All we want to do is compare these the way we use equals in math to see if they're the same. So then so in here, if we use equals, this will give us true or false of whether this is equal to this. Because remember, a single equals says take this and put it into this, and that's not what we want. So what we want to do is we want to say if size equals 30, and if this is true, because this will come back as true or false, either size is 30 or it's not 30. But if size is 30, then, and we have to write then and hit enter and then end. And what that means is that if this is true, then do all the stuff in here, in between here and the end. So we say if size equals 30, Lorna, if you want to get rid of the things on the black screen, you can just hit escape and it gets out of the black screen into the code screen. So we're going to say if size is 30, then seconds plus equals 1. So now it's going to add, only if size gets up to 30 will it add 1 to seconds. And then it's going to reset size back to 0. So that way it starts back at 0 again and now counts up again. So size will start at 0, seconds will start at 0. Then 30 times a second, it will add 1 to size and check to see if it's equal to 30. And if it is, it will add 1 to seconds and then reset size to 0. And then I'm going to add my CLS back into my draw function, because what that does is that tells it every time we update the screen, also clear the screen so that we don't have anything else on the screen. And I'm going to print size, and then right under it, I'm going to print seconds. Now, you can imagine what's going to happen here. 30 times a second, it's going to add 1 to size. If it needs to, it'll update seconds. And then also 30 times a second, it'll clear the screen, print the size, and print the seconds. So I'm going to run it. And you can see every time it gets to 30, seconds goes up by 1. So now we have a seconds counter. And the other one is showing how fast the program's actually going. Kanan had a question, how do you do a string? So a string is the name we give to variables that hold text. And you do that by putting quotes on either side of what you're storing. Okay, so if we look at this code here, I'll get rid of this space here. This is a really important thing to understand how all this works. This function called init happens 1 time at the beginning of the game. Then this function happens 30 times a second, and this function happens 30 times a second. But this one happens first, then this one happens. So it'll be this, then this in 1/30 of a second. Then it'll do these again for the next 30th of a second, and then again. So it goes init, update, draw, update, draw, update, draw. Okay. Kanan had a question, add the value of a variable to text in quotation marks. So let's say we want to actually say seconds. So we could say print time space and then dot dot. And what the dot dot does, it says add this to this. It's kind of like a plus symbol for text, but what the dot dot says, like, these two should go together. It should print all of this. It should print time, and then add to that, it should print seconds, so that it prints time and then how many seconds. And so if we run that, it goes like this. See how it does time, space, and then adds the seconds. So Sean had a question, says unclosed if on line 9. That means that on line 9, you either didn't put a then or forgot to put an end for the if. You might have an end for the function, but you need an end for the if. And that's really important to have. The other thing is make sure you put these parentheses around it too, here. Coding is very finicky in terms of if you accidentally forget one thing, the whole thing breaks. So like, for example, if I accidentally forget one parenthesis and I run it, nothing works. It's totally broken. And I don't want you to get frustrated by that, because when you do something like that, you run it and it says, and it gives you a big error like this. Just look at the error, and sometimes you can tell what's wrong. So like in this way, it says the error's on line 15, tab 0, and it says unclosed parenthesis. Oh, well, that's kind of a hint. So we go to tab 0, and we go to line 15. You can tell the lines right down here. And you see, oh, I forgot a parenthesis. Okay, good. So end the parenthesis. Now when we run it, okay, now it works fine. And sometimes you have to go through that a few times. So Lorna, once you send me an email, and I will be happy to help you out with that, just to make sure we can get that fixed, okay? And I'm gonna, hold on, just so everybody has it, I'm gonna put on the screen here, I'm gonna put my email address, just so everybody has it. this is my email address. So if you have any questions about what we're covering today, or you have things that don't work and you can't get it figured out, then send me an email at that address and I will be happy to figure it out. Either we can do like a quick Zoom call and figure it out, or maybe I can help you out by email. Either way, if you send me an email to that address, I will be happy to help. So I'm going to leave this up for a sec so you have time to write it down. It's Dylanb, D-Y-L-A-N-B at delphian.org, D-E-L-P-H-I-A-N.org. Okay. And you can send me code, you can send me questions, anything you need, and I will be happy to help out. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my Pico 8 thing here. Okay. So Milo had a good question. It was, what happens if we put a number in CLS? Well, that's a good question, because CLS is how you give a function information, right? And these are functions just like these, except these ones we wrote ourselves, and these ones are already baked into Pico 8. So sometimes you can put numbers in here and it has different results. So for example, if I go over to the sprites, you see each of these colors. Well, if I put my mouse over a color, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to put my mouse over a color, and then I'm going to look right down here. You see down here? See how it says color 11? Now, watch if I move my mouse to other colors. See how it changes the color to different colors? So here, this red is color 8, then we have color 10, and color 9, and color 1, and color 3. So if we put one of those color numbers in the CLS parentheses, it will clear the screen to that color. So for example, let's say we want to make like a sky blue. Well, that's color 12, right? So if we go back and we go to our code and, oops, I got to get rid of that stuff. Okay, if we go back here and then we put in color 12, now when we run it, you see it made it blue. What if we put like 1? Or actually, let's put like 3. Now it's green. Nice, good job, Kanan. He made a minute counter. Okay, so I'm gonna hit escape and escape again. So Isaiah had a question on how to load a game that you already saved. So remember at the beginning, I typed save game, and if I hit Control S, it will save it again. But let's say I had another game that I want to load, like load super or neat game. I think that was one. Yeah, so if I type load neat game, that's an old game that I already had. So if I hit load, now it loads that. Okay, so I just type in the name of the game that I already had. Now if I want to load the one that we were just working on, I type load game, and now it loads that. Okay, and if I hit escape, see we have our code back again. Okay, if you want to stop the numbers from keep going, hit escape. So if I'm running this, and if I hit escape, it stops the numbers, and if I hit escape again, it goes back into my code. Okay, so I'm just going to recap what we covered today. Okay, we have variables that can store information. And if you remember, we have variables that can store more than one piece of information, like sizes equals, and then curly braces, we can use like lots of things. Like we can store tons of numbers in here. And if we want to get to one of them, we can say sizes, square bracket, and then like I want the fourth one. Right? Or we can use something like, we can use the number sign in sizes, and that tells me how many things are in this. Okay, so we're going to use these concepts tomorrow when we start making our game. Okay, Lorna, send me an email and I will be happy to help you. Okay, so the last thing I want you to remember is that we have these functions init, update, and draw, and those are special functions that Pico 8 will run all by itself. And it runs this one first, then this one, then this one, and then it goes back and reruns these 30 times a second. Okay. So unfortunately, that's all we have the time for today. Tomorrow, we're going to get started on writing our game. And the other thing that I want you to know is that this is a lot to take in. This is a lot to learn all at once. And a lot of it can be very unfamiliar. And I don't want you to be too worried about like, oh my gosh, this is like too much. Because a lot of times for coding, it's just the practice of typing it in and doing it again a few times, and it starts to get more and more familiar. So I understand that for a lot of you, this is probably a lot of information all at once, and it's very new, and that's okay. All right. Yes, I will send you an email about this, or send a video about this if you want it, and I want to make sure that everybody can like go back and watch it again if they need to. And then same thing with the lessons that we do tomorrow. Don't worry, all of it gets recorded, and you can go back and rewatch it again or pause it as many times as you need. All the lessons that we're going to do get recorded so that you can watch them again. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. It's totally fine. And even after the class is over, it's totally fine if you keep sending me questions. I'm happy to help out. That's right. So Kanan was saying, so init runs once at the beginning, updates for adding variables and stuff, and draws for drawing stuff on the screen. That's basically how it goes. So init, you kind of just get everything started, and then an update is any changes you want to happen in the game, like maybe your player's moving around, and then draw is how you get all the stuff drawn to the screen. And so we're going to be going over this a number of times, and you'll see tomorrow we're going to be making a new game that we haven't made before, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. Okay. Shanna, great. I will look for your email. That's all we have time for today. We've got to get ready for the next class. But thank you all for attending, and I will see you all tomorrow, and we'll start making our game tomorrow. I'm excited. All right. Bye, everybody.